Hey guys, and welcome to Life with Aprons. Today I'm in the kitchen and I want to show you how to make a delicious beef stew that you can and put up in your pantry so that you can grab a fast item that will be easy to reheat in the winter time. I've got my fall apron on, the weather is getting cooler, and it's time to make some beef stew. Join me. Okay, I've got my vegetables ready. I've got my potatoes and carrots over there. This is my beef stew. I have about 5 to 6 pounds of beef stew here. Now, what I did is I cut them into smaller chunks because I don't like really big chunks in my beef stew. So I cut it up smaller. And what we're going to do is I'm just going to throw some tallow that I actually got from the same cow. I'm gonna throw a little bit of tallow in there, let it melt. And then all I'm going to do with the meat is I just wanna brown the outsides. We're not looking to cook the entire inside because when I go to pressure can it, it will finish cooking the meat. So all I want to do is make that nice brown edge on the meat. So let me grab something to move it around. My tallow has melted. And if you see my dogs walking around, they can they can smell the raw meat. So they have been hanging out in the kitchen for a little bit. All right. I'll probably do this in stages because this is a lot of meat. And so I don't want to crowd the pan. There we go. I'm just gonna add it in like this. All right, I'm gonna finish browning the meat and then we are going to put everything together and get it ready for pressure canning. All of my beef is now browned on the outside. The next thing I'm gonna do is take my bone broth and pour it into the pot. You wanna be careful because the pot is really hot. I have been making beef bone broth for the last couple of days, just trying to get all of the bones from the whole cow that we processed in the spring out of the freezer and into jars on my pantry so that just there's less storage in the freezer. I feel a lot better when I have cans on my shelf just in case the power goes out or something like that, and I am not susceptible to some of my meat getting thawed and maybe destroyed. We have a generator, but again, you know, depending on how long the power goes out, we're here in the country, so our power can go out for a week, no big deal. I want to just make sure that I have as much as I can in jars instead of in my freezer. So I've got tons of beef bone broth. Now, if you want to know step by step how to make beef bone broth, check out my video on that. It's very simple, it's not complicated, and you will have a rich, delicious bone broth in no time. All right, so here is my beef bone broth over here, and I have, there's probably about 4 quarts of broth in this pot. 4 to 5 pounds of beef bones can make about 4 quarts of bone broth for me. So I'm going to add the 4 quarts. I'm going to let it heat up some. I actually had put this in my refrigerator last night because I wanted to get the thick layer of fat off of it. I take a little bit of that off, not the whole, because the fat definitely adds flavor. But I took just a little bit off of it, and I'm just gonna heat this back up so that the rest of the fat that remains is nice and melted. And then we are going to add, if you hear that timer, I don't know if you can hear the timer, it's my Instapot. I have more beef bone broth that just finished. I've been doing beef bone broth for 2 days now. So this is my last round of beef bone broth, and whatever I don't use in this beef stew, I'm going to can separately. I already have some in jars here. And then I will put it on my shelf and use it in the winter for my Instapot chili recipe that I have, for all kinds of things to give that depth of flavor that this bone broth offers. Okay. The tallow has melted, so I'm gonna go get the carrots and the potatoes. There is probably 3 cups of carrots here. I really don't measure that much when I do beef stew. It really depends on the person. I mean, maybe you like more carrots than I would, or maybe you like more potatoes, or maybe you like it mostly meat and a little bit of carrots and a little bit of potatoes. Either way, it's going to turn out delicious. You can custom make it to your liking, which I love. And that's the beauty of this, is that you don't have to follow measurement by measurement. You can kind of do what you would like. This is probably maybe 6 to 8 cups of potatoes. And we're going to throw those in there. I really did not. I had 8 potatoes or 9 potatoes, and I just cut what I had. And I'm gonna stir that up, and then I'm gonna add my meat, and then I'm gonna see where I'm at as far as the liquid, because I have more beef bone broth. If I need to add it, then I can do that. My main goal is that I wanted to make a huge amount, because if I'm going through all this work, I wanna make a huge amount so that I can can a bunch and have on my shelf. Last year was the first time I canned beef stew, and it was a game changer. You know, we don't eat out much. That is for 2 reasons: economically, but also because the food that you find in restaurants is junk, and there's a lot of mysteries behind it. And so I would rather pay for good quality food at home than to go out to a store and waste my money on food that is junk. So in light of that, it can be kind of challenging sometimes, because you feel like you're always on call with meals. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, you're always in the kitchen. And I joke with my husband that I really need a comfy chair in the kitchen, because that's where I spend most of my time. My sister-in-law even mentioned a massage chair, which I think is a great idea. But I don't know if I'll see one of those. Anyway, the cans that I had on my shelf last year, the jars, I'm sorry, not cans. The jars that I had on my shelf last year, oh my goodness, it was great, because there were several times where I just wasn't feeling great. I had a cold or something like that, and my body was a little run down, but I really didn't want to fix a meal. But I could just grab a jar of good, nourishing beef stew off of my shelf, and it felt so good that we could still have a really great meal, even though Mama was sick. In the past, when Mama's sick, it's always we eat worse because nobody else in the house cooks, of course, the way Mama does. But this was great because my husband or the kids could crack open the jar. All they had to do was pour in and heat it up, and we had a full meal in minutes. We had beef from a cow that we had raised. We had potatoes from our neighbor's garden. I mean, you really can't get any better than the ingredients that we had in these jars. So in light of that, I've upped my game this year and I'm making even more beef stew. And it really is. It's simple to throw everything together. It does take some time to can it, but it is so worth it in the wintertime. Okay, I have pretty much got everything under control. I don't have to cook this anymore because again, I'm going to pressure can this. It'll go in the pressure canner for 70 minutes. And in that time, it's gonna cook the inside of the meat, it's gonna cook the potatoes, it's gonna cook the carrots. Now, if you want to, you can add some seasoning. You can taste it and add a little salt if you want. I've already salted my bone broth, so I don't need to put any salt in here, but you can add some salt. Rosemary pairs great with beef. I like to add rosemary sometimes. I added that into my broth today, so I don't need to add that. But really, if you have a good, rich bone broth where the fat is present in the bone broth, the tallow, it gives such a depth of flavor that you don't have to add much at all to your final product because the bone broth gives the flavor to the beef stew. So I'm actually not going to add anything to this, but if you want to go wild, I mean, you can add anything, you know, oregano, parsley, whatever you want to give it extra flavor. This is ready to be put into jars. So I am going to fill as many jars as I can, and then I'm going to pressure can it. If you have any questions about this recipe, put it in the comments below. If you have any questions about pressure canning it, put it in the comments below. But really, this is a great way for you to not compromise on your food and still have a quick meal. I think that's the biggest thing, is that people are busy and they're going here and there, but they desire good quality food and good quality meals. They just don't have the time to make them. Just set aside a day and say, today is going to be canning beef stew day, and begin the process and do a whole day of it. It's much like freezer meals. You know, some people set aside days where they do all these freezer meals and they put them in the freezer. Same thing, except you're canning instead and you're not having to put it in the freezer. So give it a try. I think you're going to really enjoy the fact that you get to pull a jar off your shelf, and let me know how it goes. Thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned for more great content. If you liked this video, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Bye.